what really pulled you into this space, especially working so closely with small business leaders?
So I never really saw growth as struggles related to motivation. So it wasn't really a motivation problem or just a strategy problem. I really saw them as alignment problems.
Dr. P, I'm curious, were there any particular setbacks or frustrations in your early work that shaped your belief that leadership systems are just as important as the business idea itself?
So my journey really was shaped by seeing the same pattern over and over. I was seeing brilliant founders with real vision, real talent, real demand, but they did not have enough structural support to scale their business in a healthy way.
If you could leave our listeners with one strong piece of advice, one clear what not to do when trying to scale a business, what would it be? Hello and welcome to What Not to Do, the podcast where we talk honestly about the leadership mistakes that often show up when businesses start to grow. I'm your host, Shrutika, and if you're a founder, entrepreneur, or a leader who feels like things just got a little more chaotic as your business scaled, this episode is for you. Today, I'm joined by Dr. P, a leadership development expert, organizational psychologist, and founder and CEO of Priscilla Kucer Consulting Solutions. Dr. P works closely with entrepreneurs and small business leaders who are growing fast but struggling behind the scenes, whether that's with clarity, structure, delegation, or simply feeling overwhelmed. In this conversation, we are diving into what leaders often get wrong when scaling, the assumptions that sound right but don't actually work, and what really happens when growth outpaces structure. Dr. P, it's so great to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
It's so great to be here, Shatika. I'm so excited to be a part of this podcast. And when you reached out to me about it, I'm looking forward to sharing those tips and those strategies, because those who are familiar with me know that I go by solutions plus actions equals results. So I am so ready to get started in this interview and to share that information with your audience.
Great. So, Dr. P, I would love to start from the beginning here. So, can you walk us through your journey into leadership development and organizational psychology? What really pulled you into this space, especially working so closely with small business leaders?
Yes, of course, absolutely. I am going to share my journey with you. So my journey really was shaped by seeing the same pattern over and over. I was seeing brilliant founders with real vision, real talent, real demand, but they did not have enough structural support to scale their business in a healthy way. And like you mentioned, I am an organizational psychologist. So I was trained to look at both people and systems. So in doing so, I never really saw growth as struggles related to motivation. So it wasn't really a motivation problem or just a strategy problem. I really saw them as alignment problems, because a lot of micro and small business owners, they're carrying the weight of leadership, operations, decision making, and delivery all at once. They're
Right.
building something meaningful, but they're often doing it without support, without the same kind of support really that you will find with larger organizations. And these are also the supports that larger organizations take for granted. So that is what pulled me so deeply into this work. I wanted to make high-level leadership and organizational development accessible to those entrepreneurs who need it the most, because sustainable growth should not require burnout as the price of success.
Right, absolutely. That's interesting. And I truly agree that, small business owners are doing multiple roles, multiple departmental roles altogether, and, taking up and load of, almost 10 people, what 10 people would do in bigger organizations. So, talking about this, was there any one specific moment early on when you realized that founders aren't actually struggling because of lack of ambition, as you said that it's not about motivation, but
Mhm.
more because they're trying to grow without the right structure in place? Was there any, if you would like to give any example?
Yeah, of course, I can give an example. And it really was more of a pattern that became so hard for me to ignore. It was almost impossible for me to ignore it, actually, because in working with so many different business owners, especially founders, I kept seeing founders who were working so hard. They're generating revenue and serving people really well, but they were personally starting to burn out or they had burnt out. So the issue really was not effort. It was that the business was relying on constant heroics, instead of structure. Once I
Mm.
saw that clearly, it changed how I really approach growth. I understand that if a founder has to hold everything together, trust me, I am talking from experience here, but you got to hold everything together through memory, urgency, and personal sacrifice. The business is not really scaling. It really is doing this thing called stretching, not scaling, but it's stretching. And
Right.
stretching has a limit, like we all know. When there's a limit to how much you can stretch. And that
Right.
realization is what really pushed me to focus on helping leaders build resilient enterprises, not fragile successes. So with
Mhm.
growth, the growth had to be supported by role clarity, better decision making, and systems that can hold the weight of the vision that the founder had when they started the business.
Right, right. And that's such an important distinction altogether. So, Dr. P, I'm curious, were there any particular setbacks or frustrations in your early work that shaped your belief that leadership systems are just as important as the business idea itself?
Oh my gosh, yes, there were setbacks and frustrations. Oh my goodness. But I gotta pick just one for the sake of this podcast. Because as a founder, we do have a lot of setbacks and
Yeah.
frustrations, and they help keep us going. And for me, one of the biggest frustrations was seeing strong ideas lose momentum because everything depended on one person, right? And the founder has a vision, and with that they form relationships, and often the technical skill, the founder has those technical skills, but the business had no real operating rhythm around that vision. So
Mhm.
decisions really live with the founder. And I actually recently was having this conversation with someone, and those decisions are living in your head. As a founder, they're living in your head, and expectations become unclear when working with founders. When you have those decisions in your head, your expectations for yourself sometimes, and even for others that you work with, is so unclear. Accountability was inconsistent, and that creates stress for the leader and also confusion for anybody else who's working with that leader. So over time, I became even more convinced that a good idea is really only the beginning. Leadership
Right.
systems are what help a business translate potential into repeatable performance. They create the clarity, consistency, and trust. Without a team, even a promising business can stay stuck in that reactivity mode. With them, people know what matters, how decisions get made, and how the organization moves forward. That is when growth stops feeling chaotic, and really and truly, Shrutika, it starts to become intentional.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's where a lot of people underestimate what it actually takes to scale. So, yeah.
Yes, yes, they do.
Yeah. So, Dr. P, now shifting a little to what you're seeing today in your work with entrepreneurs and small business owners, what are some of the most common mistakes you see when they try to scale?
The biggest one, and the one that really helped me to create my direction for my business, is seeing business owners, they're trying to scale instead of well, let me rephrase. They're trying to scale the activities in their business rather
Mhm.
than scaling the structure. So that's really different, because they want to seem busy, busy, busy. So they're looking at just the activities themselves, but not the structure of the business. So founders often respond to growth, and they do this by doing more, hiring fast, or saying yes to every single opportunity, but they don't stop to build the systems that support that growth. So they
Right.
add people without clarifying roles. They're delegating tasks without even delegating ownership to those tasks, but you want to delegate these tasks to others. And expanding services. This one is a big one. They're expanding services before the business can deliver consistently. And then another common mistake is confusing that busyness with progress. Kind of goes along what I was saying in terms of scaling activities instead of scaling structure. So they're confusing being busy with making progress. So a founder can be fully exhausted and still be building a very little long-term capacity. Now, if everything still depends on the founder to answer every single question, solve every single problem, and approve every single decision in the business really hasn't grown in any size. The business has grown in size, but not in maturity. That's really what has happened. So you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but you really haven't had the maturity that your business needs. So real scaling means that the organization becomes stronger, clearer, and more capable, not just more crowded and more stressed.
Right, absolutely. And it's interesting to see how those patterns repeat again and again. And that's also the reason why, we see a lot of leaders facing burnouts.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, why do you think so many leaders stay stuck into this constant operational chaos? Like, even when the demand for their product or service is clearly increasing, we see it that there's a lot of demand in the market, but still there is this, constant operational chaos.
Because really and truly, Shatika, demand itself does not fix a weak system. There is demand, but if you don't have the systems in place, that having the demand is not going to improve your systems. What it really does is that it ends up exposing those weaknesses. That's what it does in the system. And when a business starts growing, whatever is unclear in the background becomes painfully visible when things start growing, when you don't have sufficient structures and sufficient systems. So if roles are vague, that vagueness multiplies. It doesn't disappear. If workflows live in someone's memory, the business becomes dependent on that person. If the founder has not made any shift from primary doer to strategic leader, growth just creates more pressure around the same bottleneck. And, a lot of founders are deeply capable, but they're still leading from habit instead of from structure. They're answering everything, rescuing, doing the whole rescue thing constantly for the business and carrying too many decisions themselves. All of that can feel efficient for a while, but especially in a small team, it becomes a source of operational chaos as the business grows. Growth requires different way of leading. It requires clarity, trust, and systems that allow the business to function without running on urgency all day. Because Shatika, every single thing is not urgent. And
Right.
that's why leaders and founders, they need to understand what system they have and fix the weaknesses.
Right, right. It's like almost like they're growing, but not really evolving as leaders.
There you
The
go.
company is
Hmm.
growing, but not evolving as leaders.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
You got it.
So, in that context, Dr. P, would you like to share an example without naming, names,
Hmm.
where a business had strong potential, but they really struggled because of structure, clarity, or accountability, because it just wasn't there?
Yeah, I can do that. I work with a business owner in wellness. That's the one that comes to mind as you're talking. Business owners working in the wellness space. That business owner had a strong mission, a real potential for business, but the business kind of stuck. It had hit a plateau of sorts. And the problem really was not a lack of passion on the founder's part. The passion was still there. It really was a lack of clarity. Because with this business owner, her services needed refinement. Her growth priorities, like we were just talking about prioritizing, right? Her growth
Right.
priorities were not clearly sequenced. And then the people side of the business was not aligned with where she wanted to go. And we've already mentioned alignment, in this interview so far. So
Right.
once we really clarified that roadmap, tighten her offer, and align her daily actions. That one was a big one, to align those daily actions with her long term goals. The business started to move so much differently. She was able to attract better fitting clients for her business. She built more intentionally and she lead with so much more confidence. I can still see the look on her face when she said to me, "Oh my gosh, I feel so much more confident now." And she really took on that title of being a business owner, which was something she hadn't before. She would tell people, "Yeah, I have a business," but she never really owned the whole "I am the business owner, I am the founder." So in
Right.
working with her, she was able to really gain that confidence and started leading with that confidence. So in that kind of situation, it's exactly why I care so much about diagnosing before taking action. And it's the logic behind tools like my profit model discovery tool, that I'm developing, which helps identify how a business is actually generating revenue and whether pricing, offer clarity, leadership behavior, and capacity are supporting that model or quietly weakening it.
Wow, that's really interesting. So you're still developing the model, and then we can, get to see the model into execution in a couple of days, or.
In a couple of days. Well, right now, the profit model discovery tool, the PMDT, it is going through some redevelopment and some restructuring, and the alpha and beta testing will be available soon. So
Okay.
those who are listening to this or watching this, you can stay tuned. The contact information is going to be in the description for this interview. And if you want to be a part of it, you'll find out some information there too.
That's great. That's great. And thank you so much for such a powerful example. So,
You're
all
welcome.
right, let's get into the core of this podcast to the what not to do segment.
Hmm.
So, Dr. P, from your experience, what are the biggest what not to do moments for founders when they are scaling their teams or operations?
Oh, this is a fun segment. I was looking forward to this part of the interview itself. Okay, so in regards to your question, first, do not build on panic hiring. Because people
Hmm.
see that, oh my gosh, I need help. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I got to go hire people. That is panic hiring right there. Because
Right.
hiring, because you're overwhelmed, is so different from hiring when you have role clarity and purpose. The
Right.
second thing I'll share is do not keep all your decision making centralized just because that is how the business started. What got you through those early stages, those first couple of months or years, will eventually become the bottleneck if you don't make a change. And third, do not assume that people can perform well inside of a blurry system. Because even the most talented people, and I have seen this in places where I worked before I even started my business, even the most talented people are going to struggle when expectations, priorities, and accountability are not clear. Oh, and I would say one more thing, right? One more thing. Good thing you didn't give me a limit. One more thing I would add is do not romanticize the hustle. Constant urgency is not a growth strategy. It is usually a sign that the business is relying on effort to compensate for missing structure. Healthy scaling, on the other hand, means building an environment where people can execute well, they can communicate clearly, and move with consistency, which is really important for any business. So,
That's a
founders
big
should
one.
avoid anything that makes the business more dependent on chaos, confusion, or having one very heroic person.
Right, that's a big one. So, Dr. P, for someone listening right now who's into,
Mhm.
that messy medal of growth, what are some practical steps they can take to make sure scaling doesn't turn into confusion, burnout, or misalignment within their teams?
Oh, let me keep this very practical here. So first, you got to define the work before you expand the work. You have to have a clear and a very clear idea on what your business is actually trying to deliver, how success is measured, and where the handoffs are. Second,
Mhm.
clarify roles and decisions right very clearly. So you have to clarify those roles and who's going to be making those decisions. That has to be done very early when you're starting your business. then people should know what they own when you're doing decisions. Who owns which decision here? Review and accountability. So the business is not being managed only through interruption. And then you have having that rhythm, like I mentioned, for communication. Tied on to that is building some learning into the system. So
Mhm.
growth requires reflection, not just motion. So that is thinking behind my OPAL system, my organizational development, personal skills, leadership, and education. It is designed to help leaders align structure, people, leadership behavior, and learning. So purpose can consistently translate into performance. Because when those elements move together, growth becomes so much more sustainable and so much less chaotic.
Wow, that's incredibly helpful and also very actionable. So, yeah, so before we wrap up, I would like to ask you this. If you could leave our listeners with one strong piece of advice, one clear what not to do when trying to scale a business, what would it be?
Do not scale chaos.
Hmm.
Growth magnifies whatever is already happening inside the business. If the foundation is unclear, expansion only makes the strain heavier.
Oh, that's a great takeaway. And for anyone who's listening and thinking, I need help with this, where can they connect with you and learn more about your work?
The best place to start connecting is to reach out to the company directly. You can contact us at admin@drpksolutions.com. And I'm sure y'all have that in the description down below for this interview. That's a great way to learn about what's happening, to learn about the OPAL system, when the PMDT is going to be out for its alpha and beta testing. I do also encourage those who are listening or watching this to read the IMPAAKT magazine cover feature that I did with you guys a few months ago. I believe that was in January, because that gives some helpful context around my mission and the way I serve micro and small business owners. And then, of course, if you want to continue following the conversation, I didn't get a chance to mention earlier, Shrutika, but I do also have a book coming out later on this year. And that book is going to be titled Purpose Driven Leadership, the Operating System for Sustainable Performance. So you can also look up for more information on that through the website itself.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. Do you want to speak a little bit about, what's going to be there in the book, a little bit crux for us to, little bit, we also want to be really, into it and a little bit curiosity from my end as well.
Oh my gosh, I would definitely love to talk about my upcoming book. Like I said, it is called Purpose Driven Leadership, the Operating System for Sustainable Performance. I want to first off start by saying this is by no means not a self help book. This is not a self help book. At the heart of this book, it is about closing that gap between what an organization says matters and how it actually operates. Is going to be helping leaders connect purpose to the way they lead, the way teams work, and the way results are achieved. So instead of purpose being inspirational language, it really is becoming the practical system for creating alignment, engagement, and of course, long-term performance.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. All the best, Dr. P, for the launch of your book. And I'm really looking forward to the book. Maybe I would really want to have one copy of it.
Hey,
Yes.
I'll send a sample your way as soon as it's done with the editing process. How about that?
Great, great. I look forward to it. Yes. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a valuable and honest conversation, and it was a real fun conversation. And to everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, or if you're currently navigating the chaos of growth, just remember scaling isn't just doing more, it's about doing things differently. We'll see you in the next episode. Stay tuned because growth is messy and we're here to make sense of it. Thank you so much.